Hey, it's Mirna from Trainers Toolbox. Welcome to the Trainers Toolbox podcast, a place where you can discover practical and effective tools and tips to make your workshops more insightful, engaging, and memorable. You are at the right place if you're looking to become the best trainer you can be and design truly impactful learning experiences. Ready? Let's dive in. We all know learning happens out of comfort zone, when you push your learner a little bit, when you stretch them, when you challenge them. Yet, push them a little bit too hard and they enter right into the panic zone. They end up overwhelmed and no learning happens there either. So how do you hit that right zone? How do you hit that sweet spot that's out of comfort zone, yet not so far that it enters the panic zone and where learning can truly happen? This is a challenge for trainers in two levels. First of all, you need to know and understand what is that right zone for your learner, for a person who is in your workshop. And second, you need to help them to actually get there. There is no single answer how to achieve that and how to get there, but I hope today's episode will offer you some insights and some practical strategies how to actually bring them right into that sweet spot and how to help them truly stay there throughout the learning experience. Ready? Let's dive right in. First thing you need to know is understand flow. Flow is your superpowers. Flow is your compass. Flow is your natural indicator of the right level of challenge. What is flow? Flow is that wonderful state of mental and emotional immersion in an experience. It's also known under the name being in the zone. So it's that state when we are in an activity and we are really immersed, really focused. We feel really in flow within that activity and we practically forget about the time passing by. We really enjoy it and we are really, really present. And flow happens in a peculiar place. And that place is when our challenge and our skills are really, really well balanced. I'll go a little bit deeper in that in a bit. But for now, what you need to know is that one of the ways to recognize that your learners are in right learning zone is to look for signs that there might be in flow. How does that look like? Well, they look very immersed. They looked very engaged in an activity or in a conversation. You can see an expressions that are very focused, deep focus on their face. You can notice fairly high energy, but not the hectic, chaotic energy, but that high focused, positive, driven energy of engaging in an activity or in a conversation or anything else that you're doing in a workshop. You can notice that there are no distractions. If they're scrolling on their phones or chatting with someone else about a side topic or kind of roaming around with empty looks, they are not in flow. So flow is marked by no distractions because we're really, really focused, and also no overthinking, meaning within the activity that they're doing, they're engaging without overthinking, without overanalyzing, without asking 10 million questions. They're really going for it. They're stepping into the activity. I know, the ultimate question you're going to have is how do I get them there? But for now, I first want you to recognize that that is one of the best states for learning and that these are some of the clues that will help you recognize when you actually get them there. And that's where then you want to keep them. That means you hit the right level of challenge, the right level of stretch for that learner, and that you should keep it there. Now, important thing to understand about flow, that it's a lot about perception, and that learner will get there when their perception of their skill matches the perception of challenge ahead of them. So that also gives us the clues into some of the main factors we can play with to actually get learner into the flow. Let me dive in tiny bit deeper into this, and if you can't really follow all the details and can't capture any notes right now, just a reminder that you can download the handout in the notes. The link is in the notes, in the description of this episode, and you can grab it and find the notes about things I share. It's not so deep, but it is a summary of the main things and you will find some useful stuff there. Now, when we go into flow and when we think about flow and we want to learn more about flow, we really want to understand where flow sits in comparison to other mental and emotional states. So let's explore that a little bit deeper. Let's say that the mental and emotional state of individual in your training is defined by their perception of challenge that's ahead of them and their perception of their own skill. If we approach it by that, of course, there might be other factors, but these are important two factors that might define their mental and emotional state. When we approach it like that, you might notice that they might feel in three parts of that balance, three areas of that balance. One area is flow, and flow happens when the perceived challenge is well balanced with their perception of their own skill. So they're confident in their skill, they feel I can deal with this challenge, but they also feel this is challenging and I will need to put in some effort and focus to actually step into that challenge. That's what leads us to flow, that's what leads us to the best state for learning. And what if I don't get it right? What if I miscalculate and challenge them too much or too little? Well, challenge them too much, and here are some of the states they might enter. They might be slightly worried. They might be hitting off some anxiety. They might feel in a way aroused, alert, a little bit heightened, slightly stressed, maybe even overwhelmed, but usually it's like these slight signs of stress and pressure and anxiety that start to show up. If you see that in your workshop, it means you're stretching them too hard. On the other hand, if the challenge is too low, if challenge doesn't really exist, they will go through different states. They might simply be demotivated. If challenge is low, but it's also not something that's important to them or that they're skillful at, they'll simply be demotivated. You will notice apathy, just disengagement, not really engaging. That means there is no meaningful challenge ahead of them. On the other hand, you might notice signs of boredom, fidgeting a bit, yawning, facial expressions that are not overly excited, lower energy in the room, or state of relaxation, chatting with others while doing this easy task where they don't really need to focus. Or maybe you will get them in the feeling of control, and that means they're in a routine. They're getting the task done, but they know how to do it. It's not too difficult for them. All these states, disengagement, demotivation, boredom, relaxation, control, they're the signals that you're under challenging your learner and that you should pick the challenge up. So you can notice from this that one of the best ways to bring your learner in that optimal learning zone, in the flow, is by noticing where are they right now in terms of their mental and emotional state, and then from there fine-tuning to boost that challenge or boost their skill or their perceived skill. I will share more practical and very specific tips how you can go about this, but for now I just also want to say, if you notice their discomfort is slight, like they're just a little bit worried, not really like full anxious, that means you just need to lower the challenge or raise the skill just a little bit, right? But if you notice them highly stressed or aroused, of course, then you need to lower the challenge significantly or raise their skill or confidence significantly. And again, I will share more about how we can play with this. The side of being more in boredom and on the easy side. If you feel they're like bored and really kind of in almost apathy and demotivated, it means you really need to push that challenge up quite a lot. It means it's really too low to actually engage them. And at the same time, if you feel like they're more in that side of routine, there it's likely that it's enough to just push that challenge just a little bit, just to kick them out of routine. And the flow is pretty near to that state and it's not that difficult to achieve. So you always want to start from where is my learner, how do they feel, what does that tell me, and how can I fine tune. Now I'll explore 3 different aspects of playing with these mental and emotional states. First one will be, how do you raise the challenge? Second one will be, how do you prevent the overwhelm so they're not way too challenged? And third one will be, how do you keep adjusting the challenge throughout the workshop? Now, before I dive into raising the challenge, I do want to remind you that also if you want to play more and learn more about working with different emotional states within your workshop, and also understanding how these different mental and emotional states impact learning, when do they serve it, when do they distract from it, you might want to explore the topic of emotions in learning deeper. You can do that in 2 ways. One is through free ebook that I'm linking in the description of this episode, Best Emotions for Learning. It's very packed with value, tips, and ideas on how you can, approach emotions and learning, but also with science on what is the impact of emotions on learning process. And then the second way is by joining me on a course called Optimal Emotions for Learning, where in 3 online modules, we dive in quite deep, but quite fast, into an emotional journey that happens for participants in your workshop. And you play with some real case scenario and you work with different tools to actually influence emotion that then will influence the depth of learning in your workshops. So consider joining me there if this is a topic that's important for you. And now let's go and explore raising the challenge bit. Now, to raise the challenge, here are 3 things you can do. So this is for scenario when you realize they're under challenge, they're taking it too easy, they're a bit bored, relaxed, in state of control. What do you do then? First thing you can do is to prepare. The more you know about your participants and their level in advance, the better you can plan how will you challenge them and what will be the right level and fit for them. So preparation is great if you can do more of need analysis, if you can talk to them in advance. These are all big advantages that will help you design the right level of challenge. But no matter how much you prepare, you will need to fine-tune the exact difficulty based on specific people in training, based on specific individual skills and confidence, and based on actually meeting them and not just learning about them in advance. So always seek to prepare as much as you can and learn about them as much as you can, design the right level of challenge, but then also have many ways prepared on which you can fine-tune that challenge. Now, the second thing you can do is work on their motivation. When you want to fine-tune the challenge, there are different ways that you can raise the challenge. One way is to apply some different limitations. For example, when you give them an active task or an exercise or a challenge, you also take away some of the resources they have in that moment. In some way, you limit them. You add some extra conditions of how they need to achieve this challenge that will limit them in a way. And through these limitations, you're actually making the task more difficult and more challenging. That's one way of fine-tuning it. Second way of fine-tuning that difficulty is through criteria that you set for quality of the outcome of the task they need to achieve. So in some way, you set pretty high bar to which quality they need to actually perform a certain task. So a bit of perfectionism, a bit of pressure, a bit of positive pressure there. And then the third way you can play to raise the challenge can be by applying some time restrictions. So giving them shorter time than needed or fairly short time, or in some way applying a bit of time pressure there to actually push them in terms of that challenge. And as always, if you do too much of these things, you will push them too far. So you really want to pay attention. You want to raise the challenge if you realize that they're bored, disengaged, too much in routine, too much in relaxation. Then you want to apply these kind of limitations, quality criteria, or maybe time restrictions. If you sense they're more on the anxious side, then you want to be lowering the challenge, not raising the challenge, obviously. Now, one of the best ways you can fine-tune the challenge, especially taking into account you have different individuals in the group and they might have different levels and different needs in terms of the challenge. So one of the best ways is to give them more ownership over their process, give them more ways to manage their own challenge, give them different options to which level they want to push themselves or play. That is the first thing, all about fine-tuning when you want to raise the challenge. The second thing you must keep in mind when keeping the challenge is motivation, because they will not approach the challenge in a positive way if they don't care. If they don't care about the workshop, if they don't care about the activity, if they don't care about you, about the group, and so on. So you want to be really careful about how you build the motivation for a certain challenge. You want to be mindful that at the beginning of the workshop, you share really valuable goal that they will achieve through this workshop, and that also at the beginning of a challenge or a certain activity, you offer some sort of motivation and goal and a reason to engage. And here it's especially great if you can also allow for certain choice within activities that will play more to their individual motivation. I'm also linking in the description of this episode a visual with an overview of 6 ways to motivate adult learners. So for more on motivation, you might want to check that one. And number three in raising the challenge is to introduce moderate level of risk. Risk is actually your friend, because it is something that raises the pressure a little bit and very often pushes people from that sense of control and routine into flow by this a bit heightened motivation and heightened pressure. Now, people are very different with how much they like risk and how they cope with risk, so you might want to be a bit careful here. But overall, some of the ways you can work with risk and through that gain more focus and more motivation, it will be by offering certain reward or certain consequence of some activity, or by introducing some social risk. That's a especially good one, like they need to share something with others, present something to others, and in some way be a bit exposed in a positive way to feedback and almost like social judgment a little bit. And then you can also introduce physical risk, but this one I would be really careful about. This one would make sense when it's an activity which includes physical skills, and it could definitely be a little bit risky for you as a trainer as well. But it is also an option. Now, with risk, one thing that is really important is how easy it pushes people into anxiety. So you want to be really careful about risk and how you use it, but it's also really, really powerful too. Okay, so shortly, if you feel like your people are bored, relaxed, and too much in control and routine, and you want to push them and raise the challenge, you need to think in advance what's the right level of challenge. Fine-tune that challenge through different limitations, quality criteria, time restrictions, and through giving them more ownership over their process. Then you also want to work on their motivation. The more they care about the goal, the more challenging it will feel, because the more important the outcome will be to them. And then finally, you want to play with risk a little bit to apply positive pressure. I hope that was helpful. But how do you see when raising the challenge, when pushing them a little bit, how do you see not to push them too far? Let's talk a little bit about that. How do you prevent an overwhelm? There are 3 things, again, you want to think about when preventing overwhelm. First, building safe environment. It is absolutely crucial in order to prevent overwhelm that they feel safe. If you want them to engage with the challenge actively, they need to feel safe first. If you don't build a safe, connected, relaxed environment within the workshop, they will not be very prone to actually step into the challenge, especially if they don't know the group really well. So you want to think both physically and socially, how are you creating sense of safety in your workshop? This is a huge topic, really important one. It's one we cover a lot on Train the Trainer and in different places in Trainers Toolbox, but I'm also considering doing a podcast episode on creating safety. So if that sounds appealing, do let me know, because I pick topics also based on what you want to listen about, as there are always too many. So you can reach out through LinkedIn. You can find my profile linked in the description of this episode, or through any Trainers Toolbox newsletter. You can simply hit reply and let me know if that's a topic that you would like me to explore in the future, or if there's some other topics on top of your mind you would like me to explore. So the most important thing to prevent overwhelm is to build that safety before you launch the challenge. Start with safety, launch the challenge later. The second thing is to also recognize that that balance of flow, where they feel like their challenge are balanced, that is hugely result of their perception of the challenge ahead of them, and also their perception of their own skills. In other words, it's a lot down to their confidence. So when we want to prevent overwhelm, we basically have 2 routes we might want to take if we don't want to get them too stressed, too anxious, too alert. One route is to lower the challenge, maybe chunk it down in smaller steps, or play to make challenge lower. And the second way is to work on their perception of their own skill, to make it a little bit to give them more confidence, to help them think of their skill as a bit higher than they maybe initially did. Now, that is not always a good thing, because in reality, you want them to have a realistic perception of their skills. But for them to be able to stretch a little bit, they do need to be a little bit confident, and they might need a bit of that confidence boost. And sometimes they might be underconfident, so you do want to build a bit of that confidence. So you do want to keep balance between skills and challenge realistic. That challenge is difficult but realistic for them to achieve. But in many cases, that will mean you need to boost their confidence a bit. That means that before launching into a challenge, you can do some of the next things. You can reflect a bit, have them reflect a bit on their strengths. Or you can have others play a bit of giving them a bit of recognition, or others talking about their strengths. You can have them reflect on past similar experiences when they successfully confronted and handled similar challenge well. You can also help them make a strategy and their plan for this specific challenge. That will give them more confidence into the challenge. So in all these ways, you're really just boosting their perception of their ability to deal with the challenge. And with that, they feel less overwhelmed. And number 3, you might want to offer some support and some resources, because that will enhance their perception of the skill. That might mean you might offer direct support of you as a trainer to help them with the task or answer any questions. That you might give them some additional tools, resources, cheat sheets, tips, guides, whatever, or physical resources. Or that they might approach the challenge in a group instead of on their own, or they can engage the support from anyone else in the group. In all these ways, you're giving more support and more resources. And with that, you're diminishing the challenge and you're making them feel more safe, more skillful. So these are all the things you want to do if you feel like challenge is a bit too high and they're a bit too nervous and too anxious, to make them feel more relaxed. Now, great tip with this offering more support and resources is to also offer that by giving them more ownership on how and when they can request more of it. So you don't make it too easy for them by throwing all the resources at them, but when they come to a point that they actually really struggle, they can ask for additional support or resources to get them over that hurdle. So I hope you caught with the idea that all these things that I just shared, you do when you feel like challenge is a bit too high and they don't feel confident enough for that challenge and they don't feel resourceful enough. Then you really want to pay attention, number 1, to building safety already before setting the challenge. Number 2, to work on their perception of their own skills, so boosting their confidence, thinking about their strengths and so on. And number 3, offering them different ways of support and resources that they can ask for. Okay, I hope you are not overwhelmed just yet and ready for number 3, which is how do you keep adjusting the challenge? I talked now about how can you push the challenge further in case they're bored, and how you can prevent overwhelm in case they slip into anxiety side. But what about throughout the experience as their levels keeps on changing? Really important thing to keep them in flow and in the right learning zone is to keep adjusting the challenge in real time. And for that, there are 3 things you can do. First, really seek to know your learners, to understand them, to do as proper and detailed need assessment before as you can, to use the beginning of the workshop an initial task to really observe them and notice what are they good at, what do they struggle with, so you could adjust and support them where they need you. So this individual approach is hugely important. Second thing, always play into giving them more choice and ownership. Choice, do they want to challenge themselves higher, or do they want to diminish the challenge a bit? Do they want to take a bit of a break from something, or do they want to push harder? That choice and ownership should be with them. But it makes sense that it's with them only if they're also motivated and understand where they want to be for optimal learning to happen. That means you might want to give them just a brief intro into the flow or the concept of comfort zone, and indicate how learning happens when we push just a little bit over our boundaries, but we are still comfortable with that challenge and we are not panicking and we still feel stable, but we do feel challenged and we do feel a little bit stretched. only when you set that frame does it make sense to give them more choice and ownership. And this is probably the best and the most powerful tip I can give you about keeping learner in the right zone. Give them more ownership, but also give them a framework. Where should they be for learning to actually happens, and motivation that they actually engage actively. Okay, and the last thing to keep adjusting challenge in real time is to really just pay attention to their emotional and mental state. What facial expressions do you see? What types of engagement do you see from them? Are they in flow? Are they a bit anxious? Are they showing signs of feeling restless and insecure and alert? Or are they showing signs of boredom? Based on that, will you fine-tune a challenge a little bit? Throw in an additional criteria, add on a tiny bit of time pressure, take away some of their resources, in some way boost the challenge, or the opposite, bring in more safety on spot based on what you notice in their mental and emotional state. I hope you enjoyed this little exploration of challenging your learner right to the right spot. If you enjoyed it, I would love to invite you to please share this episode also with other trainers who you think would find it useful. If you found it a tiny bit overwhelmed, do download the handout or maybe just, listen to it again. I would love to share with you much more insights and tips related to flow. Flow is one of my favorite topics, how to achieve more flow in training. So I'm definitely planning one of the future episodes to be about that. So do subscribe if you haven't already, and that episode will show up soon. It is one of my favorite topics, so it's definitely coming. Please, based on the things I shared, try to also set a little action. What is one thing you would like to implement and put in practice soon? If you need more time for that, grab a handout, give it a thought, but then do set some sort of intention to actually put this in practice in your workshops. And finally, if you want to keep on learning with me to much deeper level than just in this podcast, you can always have a look on Train the Trainer, really extensive, intensive, and amazing course I deliver for trainers who want to be much better at the design and delivery of their workshops and courses. And if you're already on a bit more advanced level as a trainer and you do want to keep on growing and pushing to a next level and uncovering new layers of learning, I do want to invite you to give a look on Optimal Emotions for Learning course. I'm hugely passionate about that course. It's one of the best topics I talk about because it truly gives the new layer of impact that we all create in training. So do check it out. It's fairly short, it's fairly easy to engage with, and it makes all the difference in your workshops and courses. I hope to see you in some of other places, maybe on LinkedIn, maybe in some of the future podcast episodes, or maybe in one of the courses. Please remember how important for any podcast is that you click like, subscribe, share, comment, any of these, that you engage actively, and through that you actually gave a bit of feedback. What do you want to hear more about and what content was actually relevant for you? See you in one of the next ones. Thank you for exploring this topic with me. I hope you found some exciting ideas and valuable tools that you will use already today. Remember, they only work if you put them in practice, but then they make all the difference. If you enjoy Trainers Toolbox podcast, do leave a rating and review. It does mean a lot. And if you haven't done it yet, click on the links in the episode descriptions and discover free materials and valuable resources to dive in deeper. See you in the next episode or at Trainers Toolbox newsletter.